Hello, it's the Great Canadian Bagel here, coming to you today with the next installment of the Canadian Federal Election Prediction Series. Wah! So, this one whew, got away from me. I posted this on Sunday, a bit late. It is what it is. It is what it is. This is still going to be backdated to August 1st, though, because at the moment, since we're pre-election cycle, I'm just normalizing all updates to the Sunday of the week. That's what it is. So, what has happened? Not much. We have the same relative prediction or forecast here. Really, there is not much movement going on. Like, there's a bunch of polls that are all over. The polling is wild right now if you look at it raw, like just the headline numbers. But if you dig into it, like the variance in each region is pretty tight, except for the odd poll that decides Alberta is very competitive for the Liberals, which is not going to happen. Everything else is pretty much margin of error. BC obviously has a huge margin of error, but everywhere else is very restrained. So I don't really think we should expect much going forward until at least rights are dropped, because until rights are dropped, I don't think people are really paying attention. And yes, right now Trudeau, O'Toole, and Singh are all running about campaigning, and they're promising things. I think today Trudeau promised a bunch of money for some thing in Vancouver, and O'Toole and Singh were promising stuff to people in BC too. And again, I just don't think people care. I think at the end of the day, most voters don't really care about these hyper targeted niche policies. I don't think they arouse excitement to vote. I don't think they sway people. Maybe they shore up your own base a bit, but I don't think they actually change swing voters. They don't flip people to voting somewhere else. These micro targeted random projects or specific reassurances or condolences to people. I don't think they're very persuasive. I don't think they're very big. So in the grand scheme of things, I think it's kind of just a waste of time and money for all the parties right now, how they're campaigning. I think in the grand scheme of things, the only thing that does matter, that is going to go somewhere, is to sell an idea to people, and selling micro-targeted policies isn't an idea. I don't think people get excited about that. I don't think it's going to change anything. But that's not why you're here. Looking at number changes. So let's look at the week-to-week progression. So since last week, the Conservatives recovered a little bit in Atlantic Canada, and also so did the Liberals. They're the gained ground. All of this basically at the expense of the other vote and the Green Party. Now, one thing I will note with the other vote, you will notice here that it went down significantly, 0.2 percentage points. That is because so last election, 2019, there was a major independent candidate in Nova Scotia, Ontario, and BC who got a large percentage of the vote, who are, as far as I can tell, none of those two candidates are running again. So you wouldn't expect a generic independent candidate to do very well. So I've removed those I've amended the model, so I've removed their vote shares and reallocated it to other parties because I don't expect a random independent to run in Sydney and Victoria, for example, in Nova Scotia, and do quite well. So if you remove those from the picture and you redistribute the votes, you basically get this week-to-week change. And it's mostly the reason why I'm updating this video. Like, there's not much going on. Like, Liberals gain a bit of ground in BC, lose a bit of ground in Saskatchewan, Alberta, a little tiny bit in Manitoba. gain the out east. Again, not much. We break down to these smaller graphs. Liberal trend, non-existent. I'll put this up here. R squared, meaningless. Conservatives might be gaining ground, but 0.20 R squared to 0.25 is so small, like, doesn't tell you much. NDP could be gaining ground, but first off, there's so much variance in this, I would be uncomfortable with calling that gaining ground. It does look definitely upwards, but the variance is so high, way higher than the supposed Y, and the R squared is quite low, so I'd be hesitant on this. Block, I think, yeah, it grew a bit, but it doesn't seem to continue to be growing. If we scroll back here, it actually is stagnant. The big thing with the block numbers is they're going to be always really level because it's one single province. And my model, especially in non-election times, is very restrained in fluctuations. To give you an example, like the 338 Canada model has a lot of week-to-week fluctuation in updates. I smooth a lot of that out because I don't think July 25th to August 1st, outside of an election period, is going to be a major change. You could see a big liberal conservative spike in the polls, but just because people say they're going to vote for conservative doesn't actually mean that they are. And if the spike doesn't persist, I don't think it was real. Like, we saw a huge spike for the Liberals in June, and now we're back to roughly how it was sitting in April, May. Like, it wasn't a meaningful spike. So there's no point in having the model account for that. Because I don't even think if there was an election in June it would have mattered. But we'll see how that goes. Green here, I think they are going down. It was flat, then the party strife started hitting it, and now it's falling apart. I wouldn't be surprised if their numbers do really bad. If they might even get outperformed by the PPC here. Like, PPC are solidly growing. Definitely. They're up to 1.76 here, and they look to be trending upwards consistently. And I will note, my model does heavily penalize the PPC because how it handles election error in previous elections. There's one example of election error for the PPC, and it was huge. They were hugely overestimated in 2020 or 2019. So I'm giving them a big debuff. They could be significantly higher than they are. They could pull significantly higher on election day. It's very possible, for example, that like 338 Canada has the Conservative at like 29% in change, and the People's Party at like 3-ish. That could be pretty close to the truth. I think they are, or 338 Canada is undervaluing the Conservatives because some of the really dumb, bad polls that have occurred. And I say dumb because if you watch, I think 2 videos ago, I broke down some of the videos in late June and stuff that I thought were suspect at best. Or just not a very good poll. Like, headline numbers and polls really need to be looked at skeptically. I'm not saying polling companies are trying to defraud people or lie to them, but headline numbers should not be taken for granted. You don't know. Polling does influence voters. This is a known fact. And you don't, like, even if you don't know who the people who conducted the poll are biased about. They can tell you who's funding them, and if they don't tell you who's funding them, you really shouldn't consider the poll at all. but you don't know how the people conducting it, if they're biased or not. So you have to look at it skeptically, and you have to look at it and dive through the fine-tooth comb. And yes, I will concede that is more art than science. You need to have a really good understanding of the demographic tables of the country you're doing it. You need to really look into the details and look at the trends in the story. But I don't think there's any other way you can actually make an electoral model and strive for better accuracy than aggregation. 338 Canada does basically just aggregation. It aggregates the polls and weights them by sample size through all sorts of demographic models and uses all the available data, and he's pretty good, but he's getting around 90%. And you know what? I'm trying to do better than 90% accuracy rate. So we'll see here. We'll see if my intensive research and deep intuition can improve the accuracy rate on the projections. I'm feeling pretty confident going into this that we're going to see around this. And I will note, I'm inside his confidence interval. Like, all of these results here are perfectly plausible results that we could see on election day in the 338 Canada model. That doesn't disprove him. That doesn't say his model is bad. But I want to be more specific. I don't really care about confidence intervals because I don't think confidence intervals are meaningful on a one-and-done event. If we have an election in 2021, it will happen, and that election's over. We don't replay that election 20 times to see what outcomes are likely. We don't know, so there's no way to verify it, and if there's no way to verify it, there's no point in saying it. That's how I view it. You might disagree, but that has always been my view. The only verifiable thing is seats gained, and if we go back to this other one, popular vote numbers and popular vote by region. These are the only things that we can say for certain. You can do exit polls and get an inference on demographics, which are extremely useful, and I do that, look into that. But this, what we have here, this is the bread and butter. This is the data we can actually gather. To a certain extent, we can also get turnout too. This is what we can get empirically from an election. So that, to me, this is the only data that matters. Well, we can also get seats. We can get seats, and we can get raw voting percentages by province. Even by riding, actually. You can get raw by riding. Anything else that your model posits doesn't mean anything to me. So that's what I'm trying to do. We'll see how successful I am. I'm fairly confident. I think there is a very, very high chance I will be very spot on. I'm not going to say I'm going to do 100% because I think 100% is impossible, but I wouldn't be surprised if the election happens this September, October. Likely looking at September right now because as a comment in the last video noted, there is a lot of talk on rights being dropped on August 8th or 15th. I would say 15th is the most likely day. I think 15th is more likely because rights dropped on the 15th is not likely going to affect the provincial election, and I don't think Trudeau wants to jeopardize the Nova Scotia election at all for his fellow party member, Reagan, who's running for re-election right now here. Well, we'll see. But if we do see that election, and nothing changes in the next 2 weeks, or at least 5 weeks, I think these numbers are very, very possible. Now, what these numbers don't underlie, and this is one of the only reasons why I think I am tempted to even do a confidence interval, is this looks like the Liberals are going to blow out the Conservatives. And if we even go back to this other one here, They have a lead, 1.6 percentage points. But that doesn't necessarily mean 1.6 percentage points doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win. The Conservatives won the popular vote by 1.1 percentage points. And yes, there's indications that the Liberal vote is going to be better because they have more vote in places like Ontario and Atlantic Canada, which have a lot of seats. Atlantic Canada has a disproportionate amount of seats per their population, and Ontario just has a lot of seats. Whereas the Conservatives have a lot of votes in Alberta in particular, which is disproportionately few seats, and they win them by a lot. So that's all the indication that this is the likely outcome. But it is possible that the Conservatives could eke out seats in Ontario, Atlantic, BC. The NDP could eke out seats too, and if both the NDP and the Conservatives eke out seats, it's very possible that Liberal lead could be eroded into the Conservatives pulling out a minority. I think now this is not blown up by model. This is just my opinion as a person who looks at a lot of forecasting, looks at a lot of polls, and follows all of Canadian political news I can find by sources I trust. If an election does happen this fall, the outcomes are either Trudeau wins a majority or he loses. I think this outcome, while my model says it's the best, I am a bit skeptical on it. I'm confident it's going to be very close. Closer than 338 Canada's model. But I think in practice, Trudeau will either win or lose. And again, winning is him getting majority. And if I were to bet my money where he's going to push through, and if he gets the majority, the places to look at are Quebec and BC. His path to majority is breaking the block and taking over the eastern townships, not the eastern townships, I think that's the wrong area, but like the suburbs of Montreal and the area around like Sherbrooke and like Trois-Rivières area. His path to victory is taking those and BC, because he's almost certainly going to lose some seats in Atlantic Canada, and it's unlikely to make much meaningful net gains in the prairies, other than these three. It is very unlikely to gain seats in Ontario. Maybe a couple, but very unlikely. It's possible the NDP could gain seats in Ontario from this. The Conservative path to victory is Ontario. End of story. If they even hold everything they have out west right now, they're not going to, obviously, they're not gaining in Saskatchewan. They're unlikely to gain in Manitoba. They basically can't gain in Alberta. There's that one NDP riding, but flipping Edmonton Strathcona is going to be very difficult. There's a few ridings in BC they could flip, but unlikely. They're probably going to gain some seats in Nova Scotia, is my betting ground. My model only hasn't won, but I think in an actual election campaign, plus the odds and the randomness of an election, it's very possible that several Nova Scotia seats could flip Conservative, maybe even some on BC, or another one in New Brunswick. I think this model has Miramichi, Grand Lake, or is it Fredericton? One of the two. Both of those seats are in play for the Conservatives. So easily 3 or 4 seats could happen here. But if they even get, they're at 121 right now, with 17 in BC, and no Liberal seats here. They could pick up 4 here and hold this. They're at 125. And 4 in Atlantic Canada is big. Like, that'd be a huge gain. I think 2 or 3 is probable. Like, there are 4 right now. Getting up to 7, I could totally see. Getting to 8's pushing it. Getting to 10 would be a really good performance, and I would be surprised if they got even 10. But even if they gained 5 seats in this projection and 2 seats in BC, they're at 124. If you gained these three back, they're at 128. Pick up Yukon, 129. Still a liberal minority. It's through Ontario. So, I guess the moral of the story is the next election day, if it happens in September or October, if the Bloc hold in Quebec and the Liberals hold in Ontario, minority Liberal government. Bloc falls apart in Quebec and the Liberals benefit, Liberal majority government. If Bloc holds in Quebec and Liberals collapse in Ontario, Conservative minority. Conservative majority is basically not in the cards. If it happens, I'll be stupefied and just scrap my model and make a new one, because it's garbage, apparently. Now, there is the niche possibility that the right wing of the Bloc could break off and vote Conservative, but I give that a very unlikely chance. Though I do expect the Bloc is moving more right wing. They already align with the Conservatives and the People's Party very heavily on most issues, except a few specific economic issues where they diverge. And I think it's going to become more and more like the Conservatives and the People's Party. My actual big, huge projection for Canada at the moment is Quebec will probably become very right wing within the next 10 to 15 years. Very is a strong word, I suppose. Like, I think it will still be less right wing than, I don't know, Texas or South Dakota. But it's probably going to be more right wing than Ontario or Newfoundland. Hell, even Nova Scotia. New Brunswick, probably not. I think New Brunswick and Quebec actually going to be are going to turn into fairly right wing areas, and Ontario is just going to be forever swingy. I mean, you can't have a third of the seats in the country and not be swingy. You're basically half of what matters. But we'll see. That is my forecast. That is my projection. If you liked the video, please like, share, subscribe, comment below if you think my idea that Quebec's going to become very conservative is stupid. If you think it is interesting, or if you have your own ideas on what areas are probably going to see a big change, let me know. As always, I hope you all enjoyed the video, and given when I'm posting this, have a good night. But when you watch this, probably have a good day.